You guys ready? Good. All right, good morning. We're going to go ahead and call to order the meeting of the Placer County Board of Supervisors for September the 1st, 2015. We begin this morning with a flag salute. We're going to ask Supervisor Montgomery to please lead us in the pledge this morning.
Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Ms. Montgomery.
Chairman?
All right, and now we'll have the meeting procedures read, please.
Welcome to the Placer County Board of Supervisors meeting of Tuesday, September 1st, 2015. Agendas are available on the wall outside this meeting room. If you are here to speak on an issue not appearing on the agenda, you may do so during the public comment period. There is a 3-minute time limit per speaker. The board is not permitted to take action on items addressed under public comment. When you speak, clearly state your name and address for the record. All items on the agenda will be open for the public to address before final action is taken. There is a 3-minute time limit per speaker, which will be monitored by a timer on the podium. If there is a person speaking on behalf of a group with no other testimony from another member of the group, please identify yourself as such, and your time may be extended at the pleasure of the board. Keep in mind that the chairman has the discretion of limiting the total discussion time on any item. If you are hearing impaired, we have listening devices available. It is requested that all cell phones be turned off or put in silent mode. Thank you for your participation and cooperation.
Thank you, Wanda. All right, we move on to our consent calendar. I've been advised that item 15E is to be removed not for consideration today, so simply removed and tabled. Is there any objection to the removal and tabling of item 15E by any board member? Seeing none, okay, then we will see if there are any other items any board members wish to have pulled for discussion at this time. And any members of the public wish to have any items that are currently scheduled for consent pulled to be heard. Seeing none, do I have a motion or remainder? So moved. A motion, Duran, second Holmes. Roll call, please.
Duran? Yes. Wygant? Yes. Holmes? Yes. Montgomery?
Yes.
Euler?
Aye. Thank you very much. Okay, that takes us to public comment. This is the time when any members of the public can address the board on any items not on the agenda, knowing that the board cannot take action on items raised under public comment. As you step forward, please identify yourself for the record and try to keep your comments to 3 minutes, if you would, please. Good morning.
Thank you very much. My name is Sam Toll, T-O-L-L, and I live at 5850 Brace Road in Loomis, California. Appreciate the opportunity to address you all today. In 1981, I quit my job as a dishwasher in Carson City, Nevada, and moved to Rockland for an opportunity to better myself. And at 20 years old, I got a job working for Leonard Ostro at the Apple dealer. And in 1984, I purchased a Macintosh computer directly from Steve Jobs, where I brought it back here to Rockland and used it to create an opportunity for companies like the Sacramento Bee, the Sacramento Union, Sacramento Magazine, and other people in the printing industry to change the way they did business. When I was 24, I had the opportunity to start my own company in Sacramento, which I ran with my sister. It was a lot of fun. I learned a lot of stuff. And when I was 30 years old, I had an opportunity to purchase a 7,000 square foot building in Midtown Sacramento to house my 50 employees, which was one of 5 locations that I had throughout Northern California. In 1986, when I started my business, my cost of goods sold represented approximately 3% when I considered the types of fees, regulations, and licenses that I had to pay. When I shut my business down in 2008, at the sort of insistence of the AQMD to install a $60,000 air ventilation system to ventilate alcohol that I use 3 times a year for a specific client and a specific job, I decided to shut my business down. At that time, fees, licenses, regulations, and other regulatory costs represented nearly 20% of my cost of goods sold. It was an awful lot of business cards I had to sell to make that 20 grand. When I compare the opportunity that I had when I came to California with the opportunity my kids have today, it's a very bleak consideration. Because they can speak Spanish very well, they can make about 10 cents extra working at the fast food places where they're currently employed. Beyond that, their opportunity prospects are bleak. Californians are the worst represented citizens of the United States, with 500,000 roughly citizens per assembly member and 1 million people per senator. Northern Californians, us folks here in Placer County, are the worst represented people in the state, with 6 elected officials carrying the water for a geographic area about the size of the United Kingdom in England. That makes us the worst represented people in the country. And so the state of Jefferson is a solution that people have come up with after years of trying to negotiate with the people in Sacramento to resolve these problems. And what I'm standing here before you today is to ask for the opportunity to have our case heard officially at a future meeting, to present with you the facts, the figures, and the plans that we have to provide for not a $400 billion deficit budget that we're currently suffering from today in California, but to operate with year one with a $2.9 billion surplus to pay for folks like the gentleman back there in uniform who protect us, as well as the other public servants that we have that are currently in a state of flux. So I just want to thank you for the opportunity and ask you to consider us being able to present to you our proposal at a future meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Appreciate your time this morning. All right. Anybody else want to address the board under public comments?
Hi.
Good morning.
My name's Bonnie London, and I'm with the Loomis Library Ad Hoc Committee. We've been working hard to stay on task with our work plan, which I believe each of you have received. We've given a lot of positive feedback from the community, and honestly, the credit belongs to you, the board, and also library administration for allowing the Loomis community to be part of the conversation. We also think this will lead them to also be part of the solution as well. Our focus over the summer has been community outreach and engagement. Now that the kids are back in school, we'll be distributing a community needs assessment through the Loomis Unified School District and Del Oro High School. Combined, which serves approximately 4,500 students, and there are also 5 preschools in Loomis, 2 of which are Head Start programs. We'll be surveying those families as well. The deadline for the surveys will be September 30th, and then we'll be presenting the findings to the Loomis Town Council on October 13th. Again, we just want to thank you for letting Loomis be part of the conversation and take part in finding a workable solution. Thanks.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Kathleen Byers. I'm here to thank you for not giving Right Hand Auburn the money they wanted for their temporary homeless shelter at the last meeting. They seem to have forgotten the statement of at no cost to the county. The CEO of Volunteers America, Leo McFarland, had quoted in the Sacramento newspaper saying the shelter is privately funded. Right Hand Auburn has proven this shelter does not need to be in DeWitt, nor does it need $300,000 for these individuals to get employment. The jobs were here, they just didn't look. 8 employed every 80 days, they'll all have jobs in no time. Right Hand Auburn said it needed to be in DeWitt where all the facilities are, but now we know they're having AA meetings come to them, NA meetings come to them. They're not using county doctors, that's their words, not mine. Not sure who's going to foot the bill for that, but the point has been proven. A building for them to use can be at another location. Just because it sits on county property, they seem to think Placer County is their cash cow. And I remind you, this is for a temporary shelter at no cost to the county. The site access agreement might as well be thrown out the window, as you've given them everything they wanted. But the agreement does state that Right Hand Auburn would pay for all the utilities. I do trust that individual meters are measuring their water and power and separate bills for their trash and sewer. Coming to Placer County with their handout, wanting money is hardly paying their own utilities. Keep in mind this is all for Auburnites, their words, not mine. $300,000 to help Auburnites. Nearly $300,000 for this temporary shelter at no cost to the county. Unbelievable. Please keep this temporary shelter just that, temporary and at no cost to the county. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Linda Sandall, and I forgot my paper in the back. So I'm with the Friends of the Loomis Library. I'm also on the ad hoc. Our journey to save our library has been a great experience for me. I hope the supervisors will really take this all in hand. Our town has many little stores that have been participating and helping us through this endeavor, and I'm kind of the little gopher that goes from place to pick up our surveys. A lot of good feedback and a lot of people from surrounding areas, Penryn, Rockland, that use the library and then come in through Cool and even use our library because they work in our area. I've learned a lot of facets about how our little library is used. I am a second generation of 4 generations who have gone through that library. But one thing that really hit me the other day, I went into one of the coffee shops, and this is from a Del Oro student, and I wanted to read this to you. As a Del Oro grad, I visited the library often to study or to relax in a peaceful environment. The back section by the big windows are like a sanctuary for my friends, and I'm not quite sure what the L-teens means, need a better study location in Loomis, and Loomis Library has been that potential to accommodate to the youth. Keep this sanctuary alive, and I second it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the Board of Supervisors. I'm Kevin Hanley, CEO of the Auburn Chamber of Commerce, and I'm here on behalf of the Board of Directors of the Chamber of Commerce. The board voted to support H.R. 2647, which is the Resilient Federal Forest Act of 2015, and the act is designed to provide more effective tools to managing the federal forest to prevent catastrophic fire and to ensure the safety of residents, firefighters, and the Auburn area businesses. The recent death of Michael Hallenbeck, he was a 21-year-old U.S. Forest Service firefighter from Shingle Springs in the El Dorado National Forest, is a tragic reminder of the poorly conceived federal laws that are creating larger and larger fires in our community. The federal government is responsible for managing 400,000 acres in Placer County, and only a small percentage of those lands are adequately managed for our purposes. There's been 4,500 wildfires so far in California, and California has spent $133 million so far on firefighting services. H.R. 2647 would do a couple things. It would expedite a categorical exemption to the National Environmental Policy Act for those projects under 5,000 acres that are developed through a local collaborative process. It would also speed up the salvage. You have an environmental assessment for salvage after a catastrophic fire occurs. That has to be done within 3 months. And also, any plaintiffs who challenge the project that's been developed by a local collaborative process would forfeit the bond if they lose the lawsuit. The House of Representatives recently passed this bill on a bipartisan vote of 262 to 167, so it goes in the Senate. Your 2015 legislative platform reads, seek and support programs, regulations, legislation, funding at state and federal levels to mitigate fire danger with fuel load reduction in critical forests and watersheds, and enhance programs for funding recovery when fire occurs. So I think this federal legislation is consistent with your 2015 legislative platform, and we thank you for considering our request. And I have a letter for all of you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Kevin. Anybody else want to address the board under public comment? Okay, we'll go ahead and move on to our first item. We have a timed item that is at 9:15. This is a commendation to be presented by Supervisor Wygant for Mr. Zimmerman.
Ed, if
Oh, I'm
you,
sorry. Robert was just pointing out to me that I, as I frequently do, glossed right over Supervisors Committee reports prior to getting to. So any board members have anything they wish to report out under committee reports? Having drawn great attention to the item, we'll go ahead and now pass right over it and move on with that presentation, Mr. Zimmerman.
I feel like I should make something up now.
It would be helpful for all of us if you would. Thank you.
So it's a great privilege for me to give this commendation to Ed Zimmerman. So Ed, if you wouldn't mind coming up to the podium, and I'm going to read this, and then you'll get a chance to get back at me when I'm done, if you so choose.
Gotta come on up.
Whereas Ed Zimmerman moved to Placer County in 1978, married his wife Elizabeth, and raised 5 children in the Lincoln area. Whereas he obtained an AA degree from Sac City College, where he studied surveying and mechanical engineering, which led to his career spanning over 40 years as a professional land surveyor. During that time, he worked for Spink Engineering, the City of Sacramento, State Land Commission, Caltrans, and also spent 35 years at Sacramento City College as an adjunct professor instructing land surveying and mapping. Whereas as a child, Ed dreamed of becoming a firefighter someday, a dream that came true on August of 1982 when he joined a small group of Lincoln residents to assist in forming a volunteer firefighters program for the rural area. Whereas their efforts were fueled by the 110% support they received from their District 2 supervisor, first Alex Ferreira, and then, of course, I followed because I was scared not to. Provided advice, worked closely with you guys, but really you guys led the way the whole time. Whereas through the years, Ed excelled through the ranks to become a senior firefighter at the Fowler Station, where he served as captain for over 22 years. Whereas Ed led and trained more than 26 volunteers using a paramilitary discipline and CAL FIRE training procedures to transform his cadets into unpaid professionals, whereas qualified at the same level of competency as full-time professionals to answer the wide range of calls received at all hours of the day and night, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Whereas Ed takes great pride in the 5 volunteers he trained that have become full-time professional firefighters, believing he played a small part in leading them down their paths to success, another benefit of his volunteer career. He extends his credit to his wife and his family for their sacrifices, which have been huge, holidays, vacations, etc. Ed considers himself a professional, and then when asked what he found most rewarding, he said, "It's the people that make the job worthwhile, those who help change their lives for the better, those that change your life for the better, those you work alongside in the trenches, those that help bring the program to fruition, and those that stop by just to say thank you. I even had the pleasure of bringing a baby girl into this world on one call, and I still see that young lady around today." Whereas Ed looks forward to spending more time with his family and his race car hobby. Ed used to race cars. Upon his final retirement, feeling confident he'll be leaving the community station in competent, well-trained hands, and therefore we pass this commendation. But personally, all of those things that I said were absolutely, literally true. I want the community to know that. Always dedicated, always out there. If there was nothing to be done, Ed would be the guy washing some piece of equipment of ours, making it even shinier than it would have been before. But mostly, you've been a great friend, not only to me personally, but to the community. And so it's my pleasure to bring this down for you.
This is a totally unexpected surprise. I appreciate all the kind words and the nice plaque and everything. But I must say the past 33 years have been very rewarding in the unique experiences, both happy and sad, that I've had the privilege, the honor to serve Placer County as a volunteer firefighter. And as I leave, I'm not fully retired yet. I'm still doing some consulting work with my company. I just hope that my presence the last few years has made a difference in the life of the people of Placer County and Placer County itself. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ed. All right, we have some time to take care of a couple of department items. Why don't we go ahead, first of all, and approve the minutes of the Tahoe Board meeting, from which Supervisor Wygant was absent. So item 4A, do we have we had a motion, Montgomery, second Holmes, and we'll roll call that, please.
Montgomery?
Yes.
Duran? Yes. Wygant? Holmes? Yes. Euler?
Aye. Thank you very much. And let's move on to item number 5. This is clerk of the board. Excuse me, not clerk of the board, county clerk. Too many clerks in the mix here. County clerk, recorder, register of voters, elections. This is a consideration of a satellite warehouse and training facility. And I believe Mr. McCauley will be presenting this item.
Thank you.
Morning.
For years, both the recorder's office and the elections office has definitely needed a new warehouse facility. Current facilities, it's very, very old. There's hardly any heat, no air conditioning, and we have millions of dollars worth of equipment in that facility. And it's time for a new warehouse. My proposal is that we've been looking for the last 3 or 4 years for a new facility. We've gone to various buildings that have been up for sale, and none of those buildings have really met what we really need for a warehouse. And the other important factor is that the warehouse has to be very close to our elections office at the DeWitt Center. We have found a piece of land, and we have been we have worked with the people that have put forth a willingness to build us a building, and the financial cost of that building that we've been looking at for 40,000 square feet would be approximately $5.2 million. I realize that's a lot of money, but fortunately, it's legally that we can use some of the trust fund money to pay for the building. We can pay about 40% of the cost of that construction. And I'd be willing to cover the entire cost, and with the idea that the county would be a payback. And that payback, county council's recommended a 3-year payback, which would be about $3 million. I'd be willing to go longer if the board wanted that. Another additional 2 years, say a 5-year payback. But it's something we desperately need. The building, the land that we're looking at is on Loxley Lane. It's about 2.5 acres or so. And it has, we'll have parking facilities. We do have classes there on the election side. And it will house all of the recorders, maps, and documents that we are required to keep under law. Is there any questions so far?
Why don't you go ahead and wrap up the presentation, and we'll take whatever questions the board might have.
I'm sorry, Kurt.
I was just saying wrap up the presentation. We'll take whatever questions. I'm not seeing any lights, but if somebody wants to chime in, I'm sure they
right.
will.
At this point in
Our
time,
board's not
all
shy
I'm
about
asking
that.
for the board to do is to allow us to go into negotiations for the contract, and we would come back to the board with the actual contract, and at that point in time, you guys would make a final decision.
Okay. Supervisor Montgomery.
I do have one question, and that is, this is in the unincorporated area of the county, or is it in the Auburn City
No,
limits?
it's not within the city boundaries. There are some facilities that would be available from the city of Auburn, but the cost factor, and I feel that it would be a better thing for us to own the building and the land. And if you look way out, the building would be large enough to house other storage for other departments too.
Okay, thank you.
Supervisor Holmes.
Yeah, so I'm trying to understand that it's a 40,000 square foot warehouse.
Correct.
And you're going to, your trust fund will pay for 40% of that?
Correct.
And how much actually square feet of that facility you and your department?
Approximately 30,000. You know, we could use additional space on the recorder side, but if it really came down to it, we could get by with 30,000. But the additional 10,000 would also give us growth potential for both offices, and also would be probably enough space that for other county departments that they could possibly use it.
And you would have the county pay you back for the other?
Yeah, the 60% would be approximately $3 million if we continue with the size of the building that I've talked about.
$3 million total?
Yes.
And is there an environmental document for that? Is there road traffic improvements needed on Loxley Lane?
It should be fine. There are other buildings on Loxley Lane that are actually larger than what we're proposing.
Has there been a needs assessment? I know you talked about this for quite a long time. Has there been a needs assessment by the county to do any looking into?
I don't think so.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
I'd ask at this point if County Council would address the issue of the use of the trust fund dollars. Mr. McCauley is saying that we're looking at the county paying back approximately 60% of the total construction cost, so 40% coming from the trust fund dollars, and how that then matches up with the needs for the recorder's purposes and what our board should be cognizant of in terms of making this kind of a decision using these dollars. What are our obligations when it comes to the expenditure of these dollars?
Section 27361 of the Government Code authorizes the clerk recorder to collect $1 of each recorded page fee solely for the support, maintenance, improvement, and providing for the full operation for modernized creation, retention, and retrieval of information in each county's system of recorded documents. As usual for state legislation, a very ambiguous and vague description, but the fact is that the monies are placed in a trust fund, and the county has to make a determination at the time when they're used, that they're used for these purposes authorized by the legislation. I think the law does not prohibit advancing those funds for a building such as this, as long as the county pays back for that portion that is not supported by the modernization of the system of recording. So Mr. McCauley has given us an estimate of that. I think the actual use of the building when it's put into use will be the main determinant for the county to determine how much of those trust funds need to be repaid to the fund, and that'll be based on the use that's put in place for the building.
Okay.
Kurt, if I could, I'd like to point out that we have used the trust fund money on 2 other occasions, one for the original building of the Finance Center at the DeWitt Center, and also for the annex that was added.
Okay. Supervisor Montgomery, did you have a question?
Yeah, I did. Thank you. I think it's important to note that you're also proposing to use this building, if it gets built, as a training site for elections.
Yes. And also for a meeting center. We also have meetings on the recorder's side where we meet with city clerks and other people. And also on the election side, this is a training facility for the people that work on our election boards.
And so I guess my
It also would be available for other departments to use also.
Okay. And I may have missed it, but how many parking spaces would be proposed under this?
72.
72. So ample for the needs for
Yes,
training.
yes.
Okay.
And the other big factor is that the facility will be built that will be large enough for 18-wheelers to go in and pick up items and deliver items back.
Thank you.
So before I recognize Supervisor Rand, the question I have, I'm a little confused by a number I think I heard. In answer to Supervisor Holmes's question of, you're proposing a 40,000 square foot building.
Yes.
How many square feet of that do you think is needed for recorder needs, just for your, because County Council just said that the dollars that we spend from that trust fund have to be spent on recorder-related needs.
Yes, I understand that.
And so how many square feet of that 40,000 do you think you need for recorder needs?
40%. I'm sorry. Take that back.
70.
I'm sorry.
3/4?
Yeah, 70.
Yeah, it's like 70.
30,000 square feet.
You think you need 30, what, and currently you are in how many square feet in DeWitt?
Well, actually, I have approximately, it's spread out through the entire building. I have bins. Also, I have storage facilities at other warehouses. Approximately that number.
Okay. So then the other question that I have is, you're looking at 30,000 square feet over 40,000 square feet, which is 75%, and yet the county would pay 60% of the
No,
cost?
wait. I'm sorry, Kurt. My number is off.
Okay.
Yeah, how much? Of the. I'm sorry, Kurt. I left that information behind, but the numbers is true and correct. We need 40% of it will be paid for on the recorder side.
Okay. Supervisor
I
Rand-
apologize for that.
Supervisor Rand, you had a question?
Yeah, in looking at your estimate on your cost per square foot, does that include the DSA evaluation from the Department of State Architect?
Yes.
It does. Because normally, and I've been through buildings.
I lightly went over that issue and I included that into the price too.
Because the only thing that I was going to raise is that having built several schools and other public buildings, the average building cost for a project that has to be publicly accessed, that it provides for public access, is right around $450 to $600 per square foot. So, and that's a huge deal. Now, there may be different regulations between building a school and building a public building, but I doubt that it's that wide. So, I will, I don't have any problem allowing you to kind of test the waters here, understanding that we're only responsible for the portion that's not being used by the clerk recorder's office. But I can assure you that the $137 per square foot is going to increase by at least 50% after DSA review. Unfortunately, that's just what it is. Now, I don't know if the facility is not used by the public, whether or not you still have to have those stringent requirements.
Right. I was not aware that cost would be that high. The cost factor is very low per square foot.
Yeah, it's considerable.
Yes.
Supervisor Holmes?
So the rest of the space, have you talked with any departments about potential use of that rest of the space?
I've talked to David about it to some degree. Jerry Gomez, right, indicated that he could use some space. So I don't have any definite needs that anyone has come to me yet to say that they would like to have that space.
Did you talk to David?
I talked to the CEO's office, yes.
Okay, all right. Okay, thank you.
All right, well, I don't see any other questions by board members. Any member of the public want to address the board on this item prior to us taking any kind of action? All right, bringing it back to the board, just my comments, I appreciate the willingness to use these funds. I have no doubt that the facility that you're in right now is not sufficient, doesn't meet your needs. I'm not, however, convinced that we know as a county, we're being asked to go on the hook for 60% of the costs, and I don't believe that we know what our needs are. I don't know that we know if we have a need that justifies this kind of commitment of dollars on this particular facility. And then number one, if we do have a need that justifies 60% of a 40,000 square foot building, for our departments, is this the best location given what we're going through with our DeWitt master plan update? I mean, we own a lot of real estate, It doesn't seem smart to me right now that we're taking a step to move forward. Now, clearly having the dollars available for construction, if we identify a need on site at the DeWitt Center and a location that's appropriate at the DeWitt Center, having those dollars available for construction, once we've had an opportunity as a county to determine what our storage needs are. So it would be my preference that we have a conversation with Ken, who now runs facility services, and kind of have that understanding before we commit ourselves as a board to 60% to Jack's point, a bottom line base price of $5.2 million. Who knows ultimately what that climbs up to from there. So I don't think, for my preference anyway, I don't know that this is fully baked yet. So those are just my thoughts before I turn it over to anybody to see if anybody has a motion on this item at this point. Supervisor Holmes?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I agree with your analysis. There's too many loose ends at this right now. I understand your need, but I think we need to tighten it up and find out what the actual costs are, and then also the needs of the county for using those extra spaces. And so,
right. Well, if the board decided you don't need that additional $10,000, then it comes down to about a $4.5 million price, and that just would build the recorder's needs and the elections needs.
Well, I think that's what we need to determine. So,
and
that would be my motion to just go back and tighten up the costs, and then also let us know. I'm sure the county departments can weigh in and let us know what kind of needs they have as well. So it shouldn't take too long to find out from the county departments.
Right.
So that would be my motion.
Okay, so Supervisor Holmes, you're proposing a motion to direct staff to work with with Mr. McCauley on what a needs assessment would yield in terms of total square footage for his purposes as well as for ours?
Right.
Okay, do we have a motion, a second to that?
And determine a little bit more tightened up on the costs.
On costs, right.
Yeah.
Right.
And should that cost then recognize the cost associated with building off-site versus building on-site in the DeWitt Center?
Yeah.
Okay. So that's Supervisor Holmes' motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Duran. Under discussion, I see Supervisor Montgomery's light.
Yeah, I understand the concerns that Supervisor Holmes is expressing, but I think it's important to note that the action that we're being asked to take today specifically states that this would be returned, any future agreement would be returned to our board for approval. So we're not taking we're not being asked to take any action today that's irrevocable. And my expectation would be, as part of this negotiation, excuse me, that all those pieces that Supervisor Holmes identified would be analyzed under the actions moving forward. So I'm personally comfortable moving forward with the recommendation today.
Okay. Any other comments by board members? Supervisor Duran, do you want to add something?
Yeah. I think what Supervisor Holmes is saying is that, yeah, we are kind of shifting the game a little bit from moving forward on this particular proposal to doing an analysis of what we could possibly do here at the campus. And number one, if we have the land, there's not going to be a fee for the land, so that's going to reduce the price considerably, because I'm going to assume if it's off Loxley Lane and it's off of Highway 49, that what's the cost of the land? Do we have a price?
Yes, it's $600,000.
Okay, so then you cut $600,000 off the price there. We still, like I said, I'm very uncomfortable with the 137 price, which means that at the Loxley Lane price, that can only go up, whereas the county campus price, that can go down. Yeah, so.
Okay. Seeing no further discussion, we'll have a roll call then, please.
Holmes? Duran? Wygant? Montgomery?
Yes.
Euler?
Aye. All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Colley. Appreciate your time this morning. We'll go ahead and move to our 9:30 timed item, Health and Human Services. This is in recognition of Recovery Month in Placer County. Ms. Baumann, there she is. I knew that you were here somewhere.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Maureen Baumann with the Adult System of Care. We are very pleased to bring forward to you a request to approve a proclamation to demonstrate continued support and commitment to mental health, alcohol, and drug treatment and recovery by proclaiming September 2015 as Recovery Month in Placer County. I really am very grateful to each of you board members for all of your support that you provide to persons in recovery in Placer County. You support your residents and the many programs that assist them, and that really is wonderful. As you know, in Placer County, many people are living productive, satisfying lives as a result of recovery from mental health conditions and or alcohol and drug dependence. Residents of Placer County have experienced recovery on their own through treatment programs or with the assistance of peer support, self-help, faith-based organizations, or medication treatment. There really is no one path to recovery. Each person's intervention and treatment is unique to his or her own individual needs. All paths to recovery will be celebrated at our 15th annual Recovery Happens event on September 26th between 10 and 2 at the Auburn Recreation District Park in Auburn. I have flyers that I'll give to the clerk of the board before we're done. The event is a reminder that treatment does work and recovery happens. Over 15 community partners will again join our system of care staff and the Mental Health, Alcohol, and Drug Advisory Board members in sponsoring Placer County's 2015 celebration, Recovery Happens. We hope to see some of you there. The national campaign this year, Join the Voices for Recovery, Visible, Vocal, Valuable, encourages people to openly speak about their recovery from mental health and substance use disorders and the reality of recovery. I know that this board always really appreciates real stories of recovery, and so I've asked Pat Mead to just say a few words this morning about her recovery. She is a person in recovery, a provider of services, and formerly a member of the Mental Health, Alcohol, and Drug Board here in Placer County. And I've asked her to share just a small piece of her story with you this morning. So with that, I'll turn it over to Pat. I don't know if you'd rather stand or sit, whatever you prefer.
Stand.
I thought you would.
I have tears coming out of my eyes. Oh my gosh. My name is Pat.
No.
Right at the podium.
There you go.
Okay. I would like to express my sincere appreciation for your continued efforts to provide a true continuum of care for those of us that live with mental health illnesses in Placer County. I am truly grateful. I'd like to give a special shout out to the awesome full service partnerships that we have in the mobile crisis teams. They're just awesome because they provide extensive outreach and engagement services. And last but not least, I'd like to acknowledge how important you as Board of Supervisors are in the continued recovery of my peers. I was diagnosed in my late 20s while attending college. My personal struggle in accepting my mental illness, it took over 10 years. Yes, I'm a statistic. It was a difficult personal journey that instilled in me a need for a higher power to foster healing. It was the VA that I turned to. I'm a veteran, in addition to medication, church, and various support groups. So I would learn how to live what I thought being crazy. The most difficult part was not being able to silence the voices in my head. the racing thoughts that interfere with my thinking and my concentration. I found that when you lose your mind, it's a long, hard process to find it. Allow me to better explain myself. Every person experiences ups and downs, as indicated by being happy, sad, angry. But I have similar mood swings, but they are manifest as being way out of proportion to the situation, or they're too intense for the usually unrelated life event. These major mood swings are an occurrence of depression or mania that is often triggered by a life stressor. The problem is this mood state, it tends to last long after that life stressor is gone. I have more depressive days than manic. I live with bipolar disorder and PTSD. On my road to recovery, I was in and out of the hospital. I've actually had 6 hospitalizations. And sometimes I would just stop taking my medication because I felt so good. But I also became so tired of treatment and the stigma from accessing community support systems. And so I made a sincere effort to learn as much as possible about what was going on with myself, such as the origin of brain disorders, this progression, and its effects spiritually, mentally, physically, and emotionally. I never wanted to be in that space again where I could not quiet the noise in my head. Going back to my life was the hardest thing I've ever had to do after 6 hospitalizations. How was I going to be a mom again? How to socialize without being paranoid? How to figure out who I am and what do I want in life? More importantly, how to navigate everyday life, like taking a shower, getting out of bed, being totally present through every emotion, anxiety, anger, and even celebration. A graduate education was my route, my main route to recovery. I didn't feel comfortable talking to professionals in the way they defined my life. And I wasn't going to accept that that's what my life was going to be. So recovery to me is about utilizing my strengths, whatever they are at that moment, and defining what wellness means to me, and connecting with who I really am, my authentic self, as I move from point A to B in the direction that I choose to go. Recovery is the small steps taken to feel better. I was able to facilitate my goal of recovery by using evidence-based practices that the county does have. I'm happy with those also. And it helped me to apply them to myself, and I became empowered. As a provider and consumer of mental health services, I was often puzzled about why maintaining stability wasn't this straight, narrow path, especially when you were doing everything that was right, everything your doctor prescribed. It's called self-stigma. Speaking about self-stigma, when I interviewed for my last job, which happens to be with the county, this was the first time I had told any employer, thought I would practice there, about having a mental disorder. I had never came out to an employer before because I internalized every social myth and prejudice about mental illness that I could possibly think of. I anticipated I would be discriminated against. I was able to shelter my shame by not letting other people know about my mental illness. You know what? My perception was wrong. Since I moved to Placer County, I found ways to counter this shame. It's called Come On Out. Just splash your story. I found this a little bit of everything that has helped me the most, though, in recovery. Not just medicine, not just therapy, not just relationships. It's all important to work on, and it's different for everybody. I found that no one can tell you how to do it, but the most important thing is to know that you can. My life is good today. I have 2 master's degrees, one in human services and one in counseling. I'm an addiction counselor, and I began the relicensing requirements last year to become a licensed professional clinical counselor. I'm a former Placer County Mental Health Alcohol Drug Board member, and I also serve on the Adult Services Committee. I found the road to wellness by understanding how to fight a raging war within myself. I take medication every day that will never cure what I have, but I'm in an all right space right now because people like me do recover. We get better. We heal, and we find ourselves. In closing, consumers want to flourish, not in a small way, but fully, and in the largest way that we are capable of being. We need rich, accepting communities like Placer County that promote healthy living for us. As life is lived outside of my therapist and psychiatrist's office, the consumer empowerment movement in Placer County is awesome, and it was instrumental in it providing me with practical tools for me to move forward in my life. My journey down the road of recovery had many twists and turns. The road I chose had lots of bridges. Many of them I have burned. Although at times the roads seem rough, one thing is very clear. No matter how long or how hard it was, my journey led me right here.
All right.
Thank you.
Yeah, good job.
Thank you so much, Pat. So we are asking the board to proclaim September 2015 as Recovery Month in Placer County to demonstrate continued support and commitment to the mental health, alcohol, and drug treatment and recovery, and to support our local Recovery Happens event, as I said, on September 26th. Turn it back to the board.
Supervisor Holmes. Yes.
Yeah, first of all, I want to apologize. I won't be able to make Recovery Happens this year as I've done ever since I've been on the board. And then, Pat, it was really enjoyable serving with you on the Mental Health, Drug, Alcohol Advisory and Advisory Board. I got to know you and understand how you're in recovery. And I have to say, since the theme of the national theme is visible, vocal, and valuable, you're certainly visible because we know when you're in the room. There's no doubt that you're vocal because we just found out about that. And you're very valuable to us and to the clients you serve and the community that you represent. So I just want to thank you for coming today and sharing your story, and I wish I could be there on the 21st. Thank you.
And with that, Supervisor Holmes, do we have a motion on
Move
the
approval.
Second.
Okay. Any members of the public, now that we have a motion and a second, want to address this item prior to our board taking action? I just want to offer as well my congratulations not only on your ability to recognize the challenge that lays in front of you, but your willingness to embrace it and how incredibly well you're doing. The only downside, I think, for you to having your mental illness managed is it disqualifies you from running for this office. So you're not going to be able to run for the Board of Supervisors anytime soon while you're properly. But thank you for sharing your story with us this morning. Appreciate that. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, and we have a 9:45 timed item. This is consideration of future proceedings for the Placer Correction and Probation Officers Association. And we will hear first from Nicole is going to chat with us a little bit about, kind of set the stage here, and then we will hear from the folks that are appealing the item.
Good morning, Chairman Euler and members of the board. As you said, Nicole Lopez, CEO, Risk Management Division. The item before you is an appeal by the Placer Correction and Probation Officers Association of the Employee Relation Officers' determination that the proposed unit of probation officers and correction officers is not an appropriate unit. Placer County and its employee organizations have agreed to local rules in the form of the Placer County Employee-Employer Relations Policy, the EERP. Among other matters, the EERP provides the procedures governing how an employee organization is chosen to represent a group of employees and how bargaining units are created and modified. Placer Correction and Probation Officers Association, known as Pcpoa, submitted to the county 2 separate petitions for severance, seeking to sever probation officers from the professional unit and the correctional officers from the general unit of the Placer Public Employee Organization, or PPEO, and for recognition of a separate unit consisting of probation and correctional officer classifications. The County Employee Relations Officer, known as the ERO, issued the county's determination that the proposed unit of deputy probation officers and correctional officers was not an appropriate unit. Pcpoa submitted to the clerk of the board an appeal to the Placer County Board of Supervisors of the county ERO's determination. Therefore, the action before you this morning is to make a determination on the proceedings of the Pcpoa appeal, including one, whether the board will consider the appeal on a future hearing date or refer the dispute to a third-party hearing process. If the board refers the matter to a third-party hearing process, then determine whether the board is delegating its final decision-making authority on the appeal to the hearing officer, or the hearing officer's decision will be a recommendation to the board, with the board issuing the final determination. The Pcpoa prefers that the board refer this dispute to a third-party hearing process, and that the board delegate to the hearing officer the authority to issue a final and binding decision on the appeal. The County Employee Relations Officer prefers that the board not refer the matter to a third-party hearing process. After the board determines the matter in which the appeal will be decided, the parties will confirm regarding the mutually convenient date and procedures for the board and/or third-party hearing officer's consideration of the merit of Pcpoa's appeal. The sole issue before the board today is to determine whether to refer the dispute to a third-party hearing process, and if so, whether the hearing officer's decision is final or if it will be a recommendation to the board. Based on the stipulated agreement between the parties, this session today is not a hearing, and no oral or written evidence will be submitted to the board today. However, it has been agreed that either party may address the board during public comment on the board item. So with no additional information for me to provide to the board at this time, this may be an opportune point to open up for the public comment information.
Let's first see if there are members of the board that have questions prior to hearing from the representatives. Supervisor Holmes?
Yeah, if this does go to a appeals board, or is that what it's called, or arbitration?
So a third-party hearing process.
Okay. And it comes back to us, we still have to make a decision. It comes back to the board again for a decision?
It can be that way. So either the board can refer out to the third party, and the third party either provides a recommendation, or the third party brings it back to you like fact-finding for the board to make the decision, or the board keeps it amongst themselves and makes the decision.
Okay, thank you.
So today, just to be clear, today this is simply on the question of whether or not we wish to refer to a third party. And then the subset of that is, if we do refer to the third party, are we saying we are referring it such that the third party's determination is final, or it is a recommendation and comes back to our board for subsequent action?
Correct.
My question to you is, what happens if today the board decides not to refer to a third party for either a recommendation or a final?
So if the board keeps it internally here to make the decision, the parties will meet after this meeting and will determine the next hearing date, which would be a future board meeting where a hearing would be before you to hear the facts from both sides and then make a decision on the facts that are presented to you in a hearing process.
So then ultimately, the three paths to resolution here are either absent a third party, our board will hear the item. With a third party's recommendation, our board would hear the item, or today the board cedes our authority to a third party to make the decision for us.
Correct.
Those are the three paths to resolution.
Yes.
Okay. Supervisor Duran.
Yeah, what's the process for the third party neutral? How is that arranged? Is that a service? Does one side pick one, another side pick one, and then they pick a third, those two pick a third, and then, so kind of explain, how does that work?
Right. We can actually go through the state mediation and conciliation services where both parties can come to an agreement on the party that would be hearing. And it can be a check off, different persons, or it can be that they know of someone that makes sense to both sides that they can agree upon.
Okay. Just right off the top of my head, my preference would be, if it does go to a third party, that we retain the authority to make that final decision. I have a little bit of a problem ceding 100% authority to a third party neutral. So that's kind of where I'm at.
Okay. Seeing no other questions or comments by board members, go ahead and let you folks take it from here.
Thank you very much. Good morning, Chairman.
Do me a favor, please push the little button in front of you that lights. Oh, look, they did it for you from the
go.
back there.
Thank
Go
you.
ahead.
Trying to silence me already.
No, actually, they're trying to give life to your words.
No, thank you very much. And again, good morning, Chairman and members of the board. My name is Joshua Olander. I'm one of the attorneys for the Placer Correction and Probation Officers Association. And as we try to seek resolution of our request to try to form a new bargaining unit within this county, we are thankful that you placed this item on the agenda this morning and are giving it your thoughtful consideration. Every step of this process is very important to over 200 of your public safety officers within this county that are responsible for the custody, care, and reentry services to those that are incarcerated within this community. And it is our goal throughout this process from beginning to end, and I'm sure as well as county councils, to ensure the integrity of this process, which is why we are asking the board to exercise its discretion in permitting a third-party neutral arbitrator to hear the issue of whether or not Pcpoa is an appropriate unit under the guidelines established by this county. And in light of that goal, we again just humbly request that the board cede its authority. I understand the unwillingness to cede 100% authority, but as was stated earlier, that is our request. And with that, we'll submit to the board unless you have further questions for Pcpoa.
Any board members have any questions at this time prior to us opening up for any comments from folks? All right, I see no questions by board members. Any members of the public wish to address the board on this item prior to us taking action?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. I'm Arlene Kachalia, and I'm an attorney with the law firm of Liebert Cassidy Whitmore. I represent the county's employee relations officer in this matter, meaning the county executive officer. We are here today because the association, Pcpoa, requests that the Board of Supervisors refer the association's appeal to a third-party hearing process. We understand that the association argues two different options before the board. First, that the board delegate its entire decision-making process to a third party to make a final and binding decision, or number two, and in the alternative, by delegating to a third party to make an initial recommendation to the board whether to grant or deny the association's appeal. Well, the county's employer-employee relations policy, also known as the local rules, authorizes the board to exercise its discretion in this manner. We strongly recommend against either approach, and we ask that the board hear the entire appeal. The local rules state that the board's decision on the appeal is final and binding. It seems only logical that the board would retain the final authority to make the decision on the association's appeal, and by the same token that the board would hear the appeal directly. This is a local county matter that we believe is best decided by the county board. In deciding whether the association's proposed unit is appropriate, which is the merits of the appeal, this will require a consideration of various factors under the county's local rules, including but not limited to whether, one, there is a similarity in the kinds of work and qualifications between correctional officers and deputy probation officers, two, the history of representation in the county, three, the consistency with the organizational patterns of the county, and four, what effect a new unit would have on the administration of employer-employee relations. The board is already familiar with county operations in the various bargaining units. By hearing the appeal, the board will hear the facts directly rather than having to rely solely upon a third-party hearing officer to translate the facts and submit them in a written report. Similarly, if the board hears the appeal itself, it will likely benefit in being able to ask questions firsthand and directly of the parties. It's always better to get the information and the facts firsthand as opposed to secondhand. And more likely than not, a third-party hearing officer will lack the same familiarity that the board has with the county and its operations. And this third-party hearing officer may disregard factors or facts that the board itself finds important. Assuming that the board will make that final decision, the board may not get all of its questions answered once it receives this third-party hearing officer report. And by overseeing all phases of the appeal, the board can directly ensure that it has all the information it needs to make a thoughtful and well-informed decision. We believe the board will be fair and has the integrity that is the concern of the association. And we believe the board can make the decision that is contemplated under the county's local rules. Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Montgomery.
Yeah, thank you. I'm a little bit unclear on what the process would be if this did go to a third party and it came back with a recommendation. My understanding is all those issues you raised could and would and should still be addressed by this board, including a recommendation from a third party, that does not preclude Placer County from making its case. And so I'm not sure how we would be at any deficit in having a third-party recommendation.
What I would envision is that the parties would litigate outside of this boardroom before a third-party hearing officer. The third-party hearing officer will make all the factual findings that he or she believes to be important and will make his final determination. Generally speaking, that report would then be provided to the board. Both parties would then make their objections to the report, and it could be that we're having the same hearing again before the board. As part of an efficiency standpoint, I don't know if that's what we would want to do, is to relitigate the entire case again before the board, because the board could then again ask the same questions that have already been discussed as part of the third-party hearing process.
Yeah, I just am really frankly at a loss as to how it would be any sort of detriment to have a third-party recommendation when we can still hear both sides of the discussion. So thank you. Okay.
Supervisor Duran.
The third-party neutral option is not a public option, is it?
What do you mean by a public option?
That's not before the public. That's in a room.
Not a public hearing.
So it's not a public hearing.
It would actually be a public meeting. There's no reason that we can maintain privacy of that meeting.
Okay. And I do agree with the comments made by Supervisor Montgomery. I think, and I'm the number one person that doesn't like to do do-overs, but there may be clarifications that I think would be, I can't anticipate any of them, but something may come up that we may need to clarify. But I'm very confident that this board here, is not inclined to do a do-over, but. I do think that there is room to ask questions of opinions or what may be in a brief.
Supervisor Holmes.
Nicole, if the board decides not to do a third party, how soon before we would have a hearing at the Board of Supervisors?
The parties would discuss amongst themselves and come up with a recommendation to your board as to the future date, but it could be as soon as the first meeting in October, potentially, depending on if the parties agree to that.
And so I guess I need to know from Jerry, if we do decide not to go third party, we could negotiate individually with both sides. I mean, of course, we're going to talk to our CEO, but staff members that are proposing this could meet with us individually and express their concerns before the hearing. Would there be any?
That would not be a process I would recommend. I'd recommend all the evidence is produced within the hearing before the board, so that, if you did have ex parte discussions, we'd want to have those things on the record at the time of the hearing anyways.
How about written or email correspondence between an individual supervisor and a member that is in proposing?
certain aspects of the right of individuals to petition their government prevent us from prohibiting contact with supervisors over an item that is before them. But we would emphasize to the parties that we would discourage that kind of communication because it could produce evidence that wasn't in the record at the time of the hearing, and both sides want to the decision be based on the evidence produced at the hearing.
So let me go one step further. If they did email one of us or send, and we didn't respond.
Well, and that would be my recommendation to the board members, not to respond to those kinds of communications.
They could forward any information.
Yeah, and frankly, if they forward information like that, the clerk's office will just make it part of the record of the hearing.
All right, good.
And just for clarification, prior to a hearing, typically the board will receive information. In the last hearing, we actually had them present briefs from both sides. So information is coming to the board prior to the actual hearing that you'll be able to read and ascertain if you have additional questions that may be appropriate for the hearing process.
Supervisor Montgomery Whitestone.
Yeah, I just, again, this is for Jerry. I want to make sure I understand what he just said. So it's your advice or your recommendation that we not meet with the employees who are proposing this, and that we not take emails or voicemails or other written communication. Does that same recommendation on a prohibition go for county staff?
Since county staff won't be making the decision, that's really not part of the issue. But I want to emphasize that would be our recommendation if a board member said, with a hearing pending, shall I meet with these people? Our recommendation would be no, because you have a hearing scheduled. I try to emphasize we cannot prohibit contacts directly to board members, so I can't basically say that no one can communicate with you. But what I'd recommend to the board members is that when they get that communication, they send it to the clerk's office so that it can become part of the record.
Yeah, and I understand that. What I'm really trying to figure out is, we have some scales here. We have the folks who are proposing something and the county that is proposing something different. I want to understand if this is a level playing field for both sides of this discussion. So if county staff wants to meet with me on this, is it your recommendation that we not meet with them?
Yes, I think the board would treat county staff the same way. We don't want the decision to be made outside of the evidence that's presented at the hearing. And there'll be a couple of key, factual findings, like the community of interest that were just mentioned, that is going to be based on evidence, not on other discussions. So yes, I would discourage staff from trying to set up meetings like that. And if it gets set up, I would recommend that you tell them that there's a hearing pending on this. I can't meet with you.
So everything at the hearing should be de novo then?
Yeah, everything in the hearing should be based on evidence at the hearing.
Okay, thank you.
Supervisor Holmes.
So if the proponents wanted to send communication to the clerk of the board and the clerk could disperse it to the supervisors, is that, as long as we don't respond?
As long as information is in the record,
Okay,
the supervisor should see it all.
Okay.
I mean, it really shouldn't go just to one supervisor if information comes in.
And we're not taking public comment on this?
No, this is just the first person that stepped forward.
All right. Okay, just
when I called for public comment, she was just the first one up. So if there are no other questions by board members at this time, we'll continue on with other members of the public that want to address the board on this item. Did you have anything else you wanted to add?
I just want to see if there's any questions.
No, I don't see any others. Any other members of the public want to address the board on this item prior to us taking action? All right, seeing none, Supervisor Duran?
This little exercise that we just went through with who can send what to who and who can do all that is the reason why I would prefer to have a third-party neutral to provide us a recommendation. I think that's the cleanest, simplest way to address this. It provides a modicum of integrity to the system, not that it doesn't have integrity as it is, but it gives it passes the smell test, and it also provides us the leverage if there's something that we have questions on or something that just doesn't add up. we can act on that as a board. And it's our responsibility to deliver bad news or good news. So that's kind of that's what I have to say.
Thank you. So is that a motion then?
That's a motion.
Okay.
I'll second that.
Okay. So we have a motion by Supervisor Duran that we direct this to a third-party hearing for a recommendation to come back to our board for final determination. Supervisor Holmes, your comment?
Yeah, I take kind of exception to that. I think this board has enough wisdom and through information that we can gather that we should be able to make this decision in a fair manner. I don't think we need a third party to make decisions for us or give us any advice. So I don't think I can support the motion.
Okay. All right. Seeing no other lights up, we'll have a roll call, please.
Duran? Yes. Wygant? Yes. Holmes? No. Montgomery?
Yes.
Euler?
Aye. Okay. Thank you very much. We will, at this time, take up our item 6A, Public Works.
Thank you again for your time.
You betcha. Thank you. Got to talk about hot mix asphalt overlays. One of our favorite topics. Anytime we're doing overlays, big fan.
Me as well. Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Kevin Tabor with Department of Public Works and Facilities. The next item, we're asking you to approve the award and execution of contract 0930 for the award of the Tahoe hot mix asphalt overlay to Delta Construction of Sacramento. The contract amount is $1,528,000, and we're asking you to approve the Director of Public Works and Facilities or his designee to sign change orders up to the amount of 10%. Delta Construction was the lowest responsive and responsible bidder of 5, as I mentioned, at $1,528,000. Procurement services reviewed all the pertinent documents and determined that they are indeed responsive. The project will cover just about 6 miles of roadways in the Carnelian Bay area, North Shore of Tahoe, and we're utilizing general funds as well as road funds to put this project together. So we're very excited to spend the money that you've sent our direction. So keep it coming, we'll spend it. So with that, I present it to you for consideration and answer any questions if you have any.
Any board members have any questions? Members of the public have any questions? All right, what's the pleasure of the board?
Move approval.
Motion by Montgomery, second Duran. All in favor, please say aye. Aye, opposed? None. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And item 6B is Placer Parkway Phase 1 Improvement Project. Being asked to adopt a resolution regarding initial study and mitigating nake deck. Required findings. Yes, sir. Good morning.
Good morning. Richard Moorhead with Public Works and Facility Services. I'm here before you today for consideration of Placer Parkway Phase 1. But before we get to the Phase 1 piece, I thought I'd give a little bit of history of the parkway itself. Placer Parkway, it's a regional transportation facility. I think everyone's pretty aware of it, from Highway 65 in Placer County to Highway 99 in Sutter County. We had a depiction of that in our 1994 general plan. In the early 2000s, there was a further refinement that began with the Placer Parkway Corridor Preservation, where 5 corridors were studied. South Placer Regional Transportation Authority, or SPARTA, was the lead for the CEQA piece on that and did a lot of the heavy lifting for that. The Federal Highway Administration was the lead on the NEPA piece. These were the corridors that were studied. On the southern end there, that kind of pink colored, or magenta, I guess, was Alternative 1. Up to the north is Alternative 5. The piece we're talking about today is just this section in here. This is the Phase 1, Highway 65, Foothills Boulevard North. So that segment. Alternative 5 was selected as the alternative corridor as part of that process for that corridor selection. The EIR was certified for that in 2009, and then FHWA did their record of decision in 2010. We brought it in front of the board for adoption in 2011 for that corridor to be inside of the Placer County General Plan. It's 500 feet on the eastern and western end, 1,000 feet in the middle. So the next steps were really to start further refining that alignment within or near that corridor. We retained the services of Mark Thomas and Company to do the preliminary engineering and environmental work for that. The county in this case is the lead. Caltrans is the lead for NEPA. We continue to clear it from the federal side as well, just to make sure if any federal money becomes available, we'll be able to use that. So the corridor being studied again is here. Oh, son of a gun. There we go. 65 on the east. This is Foothills Boulevard North is where it'll terminate. Thunder Valley up at the top of the photo here. This is Rio Bravo, Ace Hardware, the old Formica site, Industrial Avenue, and the Union Pacific Railroad. All of them have, all three, we studied three alternatives. They really all have the same major features. There's the new interchange at 65, which will be modifying the Whitney Ranch, not modifying, adding on to the Whitney Ranch interchange. What sits there today is usable, and we just expanded. We will have a grade separation at the Industrial Avenue and the railroad tracks. 4-lane extension with the center median. And like I said, the expansion of the Whitney Ranch interchange improvements. We did study three alternatives. Two of them are outside of that corridor. One is inside the corridor. We chose this furthest south alignment, and we did that through a PDT that was formed, the project development team, representatives from the county, consultant staff, Caltrans, City of Rockland, City of Roseville. Might be forgetting someone, but fairly good team. We're meeting monthly. And one thing I'd like to point out on this image, too, if you look at the green at the interchange itself, that's what's being constructed as part of the Whitney Ranch interchange, to give you an idea. The blue is what the parkway would be constructing. Again, this is the furthest south. Doesn't touch the Rio Bravo property, has the greatest impacts on the Ace Hardware facility as well as the old Formica site. We looked at another alternative slightly more north of that, where it clips the Rio Bravo property. Again, there's impacts to the Ace Hardware, that baseball field. Same with the Formica site, bigger impacts on that site. And then we did one that's completely inside the corridor, but as far south as we could keep it, and that stays inside the corridor even for future expansion. We're currently doing a 4-lane facility. It could be a 6-lane facility in the future. We wanted to study this range of alternatives to see if there was anything out there that would preclude us. We didn't want to tie our hands, essentially, to make sure whatever environmental impacts we might run into, we'd have an alternative that would be acceptable. The list of the technical studies is a pretty standard studies that are being done. You look at all of these potential impacts, and if there's impacts, if you can mitigate them, then you do. Mitigation measures associated with those impacts, at least the summary of all those mitigation measures. There's also the mitigation monitoring plan was attached as part of the board package. We had the initial study and mitigated neg deck out on the streets. It closed June 9th, but during that time, we had a public meeting down at the city council chambers in Rockland, did a large amount of notification, something you'd typically do on a larger scale environmental project, actually. We did receive comments on the initial study of mitigated neg deck, and they were considered, but no changes are needed to the mitigation measures. So the action we're asking for today is to adopt a resolution approving the initial study mitigated negative declaration with the required findings of mitigation, adopt the mitigation monitoring plan, and select alternative 3 as the preferred alternative for the Placer Parkway Phase 1 improvements. And what I would like to say is when we looked at all of these impacts associated with that, there wasn't one that was clearly above or beyond. They all have very similar impacts and nothing significantly different. So we're recommending the one that stays inside of that corridor that was adopted as part of our general plan. And what I would like to show on this image is where that, it's not the entire corridor that we would be taking. We would be getting right-of-way sufficient to build our roadway in that location. So if you look, you can see little dashed lines inside. The blue is the roadway. The smaller dashed lines are where those fill lines would tie in. And this is the greatest impact we're going to have, designed to a standard where you have these long 4-to-1 slopes. So potentially during right-of-way negotiation, if we need to, we could certainly tighten that up. And this is looking at, we had a photo simulation done of it, looking from the Rockland side. Ace Hardware is to the left there. Rio Bravo's out, kind of off to the right upper area there. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
Questions for board members? Supervisor Montgomery.
Thank you, Mitch. Can you just generally tell us what the comments addressed, what issues were raised?
There were a lot of comments from the Rio Bravo facility itself. It was a pretty formed comment. There were a group that were employees or former employees or people that had family members that were working there thinking that this alternative would put them out of the job, not environmental related. Then there were also a bunch that came from suppliers for Rio Bravo as well. So out of, I think we had about 40 of those were those types of comments. And we got some from the Regional Water Quality Board. They're standard form that you'd expect to see. You're going to have to follow these procedures essentially as you construct. I think of some other ones.
So the water quality comments were more about process than a
All of the
particular objection to.
That's right.
Okay.
All of the ones we saw come in there were none that were objections or made us question the mitigation strategy that we have in place for this
Okay.
document.
Thank you.
Supervisor Weigand.
Just double checking, I know the Parkway is a covered project under the Placer County Conservation Plan, and I'm kind of just checking in to make sure that, see if Kirk and I need to know anything that you haven't told us already about how that's going. But I'm assuming that since particularly you're within the corridor, after all the exhaustive conversations over the years about its impacts and how it could be covered, that everything's fine and you have no bad news to tell us.
There's no bad news to tell you.
Thank you.
We also, as part of that mitigation strategy that we put together, we made sure that if for some reason the PCCP wasn't approved by the time we need to go to construction, we have mitigation in place that would suffice for impacts that are covered under PCCP. If it is in place, then PCCP is going to be covering, and we would follow the strategy as far as what PCCP defines.
And so that, to your knowledge, and all of the regulatory agencies have essentially favorably responded to that?
We did go meet with the Army Corps, and they seem to be certainly receptive that they identified that corridor, the least environmentally practicable alternative. So they seem to be receptive to that. After the CEQA action is taken, we have a preferred alternative, then we're going to move forward with that NEPA process, and that'll be getting more into the detail of it, but yes, I believe we'll be able to get through that.
So my only question is, I'm just curious, having lived through firsthand what we went through to secure LEDPA for Alternative 5, and what that meant, the adoption of that EIR for our Tier 1 work on identifying that corridor. Why did we even consider two alternatives that went outside of that corridor?
It doesn't preclude you from looking outside that corridor, and that was actually one of the questions that was asked because I had that same concern. Because of this corridor, the way it's lined out, we weren't sure, honestly, on the Rio Bravo plant, was there going to be something there that would preclude us from doing it. We wanted to make sure we had alternatives that would allow us to be outside the corridor if we found something there that was going to make it impossible to do.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
I just would hate to have lived all that brain damage for nothing.
I feel your pain, and as we move forward through the rest of the regulatory agencies, there may be some bumps on the road, and we'll keep you informed on that.
Great, thank you very much. Any members of the public want to address the board prior to us taking action on this resolution? I don't see anybody rushing forward, so what's the pleasure of the board? Motion Holmes and second Duran in order to adopt the resolution approving the initial study and mitigated neg deck with, of course, the required findings and mitigations. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? None. Thank you very much. Thank you. And seeing no other items before the board under open session, we do have some closed session items to discuss. So, County Council, what do we got?
Board will now adjourn to closed session to discuss one item of anticipated litigation under initiation of litigation.
Thank you very much. We'll be back to report out shortly. Let me know when you are ready.
It's pretty scary.
Okay, board is back from closed session, and council will report out.
The board in closed session discussed, heard a report on one item of anticipated litigation and gave direction to council. That concludes the closed session report.
There being no other actions before the Board of Supervisors on September the 1st, we are adjourned to a regularly scheduled board meeting of September 15th. Thank you all very much.